post on Instagram read, "No one deserves to be raped." Khensani Maseko said she was sexually assaulted in May, allegedly by her ex-boyfriend. She reported her ordeal a month later, but last Friday, the 23-year-old student ended her life. Her death sparked protests at Rhodes and Nelson Mandela University. They demanded a total academic shutdown to honor Maseko. Khensani Maseko will be laid to rest in Johannesburg on Thursday. Now, higher education institutions are being criticized for the way sexual abuse cases on campus are being handled. Victims and student activists have accused universities of prioritizing alleged perpetrators over rape victims. Consequent legal action is often long and tedious. Victims are often forced to attend classes with their rapists. Let's unpack this a bit tonight. I'm joined by Connie September. She's with Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, as well as Fundi Nzimandi. She's from Parliament's Gender Commission. We're also live to Rhodes University. Kudakwa Shinjano is the SRC Vice President. Very good to have you with us. Let's start off with you, Ms. Chingano. What is going on?
Thank you very much. So we did demand for an academic shutdown on Monday and on Tuesday because we had seen the state of the university, that the students needed time to mourn and needed time to address the situation that was happening, because as you can imagine, gender-based violence, sexual violence isn't something that just started now. In 2016, there was the rape culture protest. That's when all these issues started coming to the front. So it was necessary as a university to address the situation that was at hand and to have an academic shutdown as a time to reflect on what was happening and as a time to talk about gender-based violence and mourn Khensani as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you're all reeling from her death. I mean, has it opened up more honest conversations there?
Definitely, it has done that. Yesterday in the afternoon, there was a talk that happened in one of our lecture venues where everyone came, the university staff, the students, and there was open conversation about consent. People spoke about gender-based violence. People spoke about bullying that happens in universities. And it's opened up more conversations. And it's opened up many questions about what's happening in the university. So it really did open up a lot of conversation.
Leading into this horror that we are seeing at tertiary education level. Connie September, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I was just wondering what...
Did you ask me a question?
I did. I'm just wondering how you are responding to this horror that we are seeing at universities around the country.
Thank you very much for having us on this program. Well, indeed, from the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training in Parliament, in the National Assembly in particular, our response has been, before Parliament went into recess and before that also, the Portfolio Committee has had, for example, the Human Rights Commission before us. And one of the things that stand out in that report is the fact that transformation at institutions of higher education has a range of different problems. This problem was key in that report also. We have then decided that as a committee we will not leave the matter there. Our preoccupation about this horror and this deep sadness that all of us have as we mourn the death of Khensani and very many other young people at these institutions is to say, what do we do as Parliament with this problem that remains prevalent at all these institutions? And that's why we have asked the Gender Commission to come to Parliament next week and take us into their confidence to say, as the Gender Commission, in their report that they have done that has been sent to us via the Speaker, and as well as any other investigations that they have done, what has the Gender Commission come up with now that not only address the issue, but can have a sense of young people feeling safe at all these institutions.
Okay, let's bring in
We are
Mrs.
secondly
Nzimande.
quite disturbed about...
Okay, sorry, excuse me cutting you off there. What are your suggestions? What are your findings?
Perhaps before we go into the discussion, we just want to send our condolences to the family and to the colleagues, the fellow students on campus at the loss of Khensani. We were very moved by this development. In terms of the work that we've done with higher education institutions, we started doing the work around 2013, calling institutions of higher education in front of the commission to give us feedback, a sense of what they've been doing on gender transformation. Of course, it did come up that, in fact, we have it was called then, we have a rape culture at Rhodes University.
And what exactly does that mean, having a rape culture?
Well, we understood it to mean that women are extremely unsafe. In fact, the SRC, long before in 1991, had already indicated that as students, they feel unsafe on campus. And of course, it means that there's sexual violence on the campus. And that's what we understood by a rape culture, and that it seemed to be endemic and unattended.
Mind-boggling. I'm just wondering, Ms. Chigondo, what it feels like to be a student in these circumstances, if you're frightened to go to class, if there are areas that you believe you can't go to because you could possibly be harmed. What sort of impact does this have on your work and your social life?
It's definitely very difficult because sometimes students come and they feel scared to even go to the dining hall to eat because they're like, we'll be sitting in the same dining hall as a perpetrator and nothing is being done. But I think what we need to realize with the issue of gender-based violence and sexual violence is that it's bigger than Rhodes University. It's a community thing. Rhodes University is just a small part of the issues of sexual and gender-based violence that are happening in the country. And what we need to realize is that, yes, the university can do more with regards to protecting students, but then violence is everywhere, right? It's everywhere in South Africa. It's everywhere that we look. So I think it's not necessarily an issue that's prevalent at Rhodes alone, but it's an issue that's prevalent everywhere. And I think the question becomes that even as a nation, what has been done to look at the issues of gender-based violence, of rape in itself?
But
right?
do you think
because
you're
it's
more,
something that we need to realize
that
at
you're
universities,
easier prey there because you don't expect to be raped at university? I mean, you possibly when you walk into your car at night, you might be prepared, fear that something's going to happen, but not at university.
Definitely. But I think now, having been here at university for 5 years, I've realized that there's actually no space that's actually safe. So you can be raped anywhere. University, because people are familiar with one another, probably have the misconception that it's safe. But that familiarity is actually the problem, because most of the time rape cases are done by people we know, right? People that we see every day in our classes, in the dining hall, in the roads, in the streets. So I think that becomes the biggest and the scariest problem, actually.
Okay, let's bring in Roger. He's on the line from Johannesburg. Go ahead, Roger.
Hello, Jane. Good evening to you and your panel.
Good evening.
You know, I think one thing we need to draw a line on. Students are at university to learn, not to pontificate. When they have finished learning and they have gained the knowledge that they require, then they can come out and change society. What is happening in this country is students are trying to change society without the amount of learning that is required to do that.
Aren't they the ones who are in the position, the best position to do it, seen as they are...
Are they really?
They are the victims. Look at... thanks for that, Roger. I mean, look at what we saw on the streets in America after gun violence, and when students came out to demonstrate, that made an impact. I mean, if you can't listen to students, who do you listen to?
Exactly. We have to listen to the people who are affected. In fact, we care a lot about what is happening to them. And I think I agree with the representative of the SRC. violence is quite endemic in South Africa. And I was just talking in terms of what we found at Rhodes. But the truth is the issue of gender-based violence is a national problem, and it's a national challenge that has to be dealt with. And I would like to talk to that and also the issue on higher education. In terms of the national response, we have already put our submissions time and again in terms of the decision makers to say, let us have a National Council on Gender-Based Violence. That will include the Chapter 9 institutions, of which the CG is one. It's not part of Parliament. It's an independent Chapter 9 constitutional institution. We put the Chapter 9s in there. We put civil society organizations in there. We put the decision makers in the National Coalition for Gender-Based Violence.
Okay.
And we also have to develop a strategy, a national strategy on gender-based violence, and be able to monitor it. In terms of the higher education institutions, in our reports, we made specific recommendations to Rhodes University, for example. We made recommendations to other universities as well.
Okay, sorry, so we're running out of time, so let me just quickly ask Connie September a question. So obviously you're going to be getting the information, you're going to be swapping details. I'm sure you're going to be speaking to students seeing as they are being affected by this. But how do you deal with the perpetrators? Because it seems that they are getting away with this crime. Students have to sit across the way from them when they're having their dinner in class. That's got to change.
Absolutely. Jane and the other panelists there, I think what is quite important, and maybe also I want to say to the Gender Commission, is it's 2018 and we do not have policies at all these institutions. That should worry us quite a lot, that we don't have a proper framework that is in place. So what you have is what you are describing, Jane, that the perpetrator sits opposite. The victim does not have any recourse in that the victim knows that here is a policy and these are the steps that I can undertake myself, or this is where I need to go. Is there proper infrastructure at the institutions that says these are the following people that are responsible, that I can go to, and these are the resources that have been set aside to deal with that. So I think we can have lots of colloquiums, we can have many workshops and all of that, but we need to have a proper policy framework in place. We need to have something that everyone know, these are the things that I know is going to make me safe, and this is in place. I think it is unacceptable that none of the colleges and none of the universities have a proper policy in place that address this issue of gender-based violence. It completely undermines our constitution, but also we should be worried about the fact that it completely undermines the fact that we have such things as students get, they are being told that if I can have a sexual favor from you, and then I will make sure that your marks are improved. It completely undermines the kind of knowledge that are being received at these institutions. And so there's a host of different things that needs to be looked at other than just having more and more workshops.
Okay. I mean, that's a good point, which we can talk about a little bit more later, the lack of support that you get at universities. Now, as we were saying a little bit earlier on, at Rhodes University, rape accusations, nothing new there. But last year, 2 student anti-rape activists were expelled after protesting rape culture on social media and on the campus. They took matters into their own hands. They dragged 4 students suspected of sexual assault outside of their dorms. Let's just listen to what some of those students had to say from Rhodes University. I'm sure it's going to come any minute now. It's a soundbite from Rhodes University.
As much as it is about rape, it's also about the way that men feel towards women's bodies and the way that they think about women's bodies as an object, as something that they're entitled to. The way that they address us, like in public spaces as well, they catcall us, they just feel like they're entitled to us because they're attracted to us.
Rape culture is just people feeling entitled and thinking, for the mere fact that they can call you lewe,
Yeah.
you know, basically that thing. What is that? Why would you refer to another human being as that thing? No. I look at a man and I'm like, what is he going to do to me? What are his intentions? Yeah. Should I say hello? If I say hello, is he going to take it the wrong way? But then they get angry at you because you have an agency over your own body, because they feel so entitled to it that you're not supposed to say no to them.
Yeah.
And no to them is like, what? You don't know? What's no to you? You don't have the right to say no. Your place as a woman is not to say no. It's to just say yes.
I'd like to talk about that entitlement a little bit later, but let's bring in Destiny. She's on the line from Cape Town. Go ahead, Destiny.
Destiny is actually a he.
Hello, go ahead, Destiny.
Yes, good evening. I'm just trying to ask you, what is the penalty given to people who perpetrate this kind of heinous crime on women in this country? What does the law say? Because when people, I'm just asking in the context of the leniency in the judicial system. Sometimes people commit this kind of crime against women. They go to court and they begin to, sometimes they even try to look at their psychological well-being if they were normal before committing this crime. How can people commit this kind of crime and then go scot-free? Sometimes they even begin to question if the man that committed the crime is actually having a psychological problem. So I want to know, how can people commit a crime and then you begin to assess the psychological issues on the person? Crime is a crime. How can you go and rape a woman? When I'm talking now, people will even say, yeah, I'm going too far. How about the death penalty? You take up a life, how can we strengthen the law so that you know that if you kill any person in this country, you will die?
Okay, let's put that to Ms. September. Thank you for those comments. There is a problem there, isn't it, that the perpetrator obviously feels that they can get away with it, that the law doesn't come down on them hard enough.
Yes, indeed, Jane, and thank you to the caller also. That's why I connect what I have said earlier on the lack of a proper policy framework at the institutions. Because if there was a proper policy framework at the institution, you would have known the first thing is that the perpetrator would have been suspended. You would have made sure that the victim has a much safer place, and that a range of different things can be done. You cannot isolate the institutions from what the general law and the general constitution out there is in the country.
It's got to start with them,
It has to be applied in the institutions also.
All right. Sheila is on the line from...
It absolutely got to start.
Yeah, okay. Sheila is on the line from Cape Town. Go ahead, Sheila. Okay, we've lost her. Chingana, let me bring you back to the topic of how women are viewed. We heard from a few students there. I mean, it almost seems as though that many of the men feel that they have to go with them, that it's their right to take what they want from these women. Is that correct?
I totally agree. And I think sometimes it's because of how our society is made up that men sometimes a no to them feels like maybe the woman is playing hard to get. So when consent is actually not given, they're like, maybe if I press a bit more, this person will say yes. So I think there's this entitlement that even when a person says no, it's not taken as a no. So when you do ask a question, you're either expecting a yes and a no, but then I think now, over time, there's this entitlement to a woman's body. Like was rightfully said by one of the speakers, if you ignore a man, if you're walking, they then start saying bad things to you and stuff like that, where it now feels like you are entitled to speak to them, you're entitled, your body is theirs. So I think it's a very complex situation where now women are forced to speak to men because of fear that if they don't, something bad might happen to them. Imagine walking in the road at midnight. When you see a man, your heart beats so fast because you're like, all right, should I talk to him to just see if I'm safe, or should I continue walking? So it's very complex, and it's quite scary.
Okay, and I should imagine what exacerbates this, and briefly if you will, because we have run out of time, is the element of silence. People are too frightened to speak out. How do you break that silence?
It's actually quite difficult. It's a complex issue, as we say. But I think some of the issues that we have to perhaps share is that in the work that we've done with the universities, we've been able to look at their policies. What we found was sort of a disjuncture. There's no connection between the policies and the implementation. So we've been able to actually monitor them and work with them to move them forward in terms of tightening up their policies, reviewing their policies so that they can be more impactful and more meaningful. For example, Rhodes University, they've been able to set up a sexual violence task team, which also did its own investigation and made recommendations to the university. And they are busy implementing those particular recommendations. They've also restructured their sexual harassment office. And of course, they've now got an independent disciplinary board that deals with such issues on campus. Of course, more needs to be done in terms of, for example, speeding up investigations. I think we wouldn't have had a situation where this young lady kills herself if the investigation was done, say, in the span of 4 to 6 weeks, perhaps also keeping her abreast all the time in terms of what is happening with her case.
And let's hope we all learnt a lot from that so that it never ever happens again. Let's leave it there. Thank you all for the chat, Ms. Chingano, Ms. Nzimande and Ms. September. Thank you very much. The headlines are coming up at 9 o'clock. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton.